The North is cold and full of whispers.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description if you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube. All on our Patreon. The Great Hall of Winterfell blazed with warmth and light. Torches lined the stone walls, their flames dancing across the faces of lords and ladies who had gathered for the evening feast. Laughter echoed through the ancient hall. The smell of roasted meat and honeyed wine filled the air. At the high table, Lord Eddard Stark sat with his lady wife Catelyn, their children arrayed around them. Robb, the heir, sat tall and proud. Sansa, beautiful even at her young age, whispered to her septa. Arya fidgeted with her food, bored by the formality. Bran climbed on his chair despite his mother's disapproving looks. Little Rickon played with a piece of bread. At a table far from the dais, separated by custom and birth, Jon Snow sat alone. He was 14 years old, dark-haired, gray-eyed. The Stark looked through and through, except for the silence that surrounded him. Bastards did not sit with their true-born siblings. Bastards did not laugh freely at feasts. Bastards remembered their place. Jon picked at his food without appetite. Around him, lesser knights and household guards ate and drank. But no one spoke to him directly. He was Lord Stark's son, but not truly. He was tolerated, not welcomed. He had grown accustomed to it. The isolation, the whispers, the way Lady Catelyn's eyes hardened when they fell upon him. The musicians played a northern tune, simple, repetitive, the kind of song that required no skill, only enthusiasm. Jon reached for his cup of watered wine. His hand trembled. A strange heaviness had settled over him during the meal, a pressure building behind his eyes. He set the cup down without drinking. The hall seemed too bright suddenly, too loud. The voices of the feasting lords blurred together into meaningless noise. Pain lanced through his skull. Jon gasped. His hands gripped the edge of the table. The wood grain pressed into his palms. The pain intensified, a crushing weight that felt like a hammer striking the inside of his forehead. He tried to stand. His legs wouldn't obey. The hall tilted. Voices rose in alarm, but they sounded distant, as if he'd been plunged underwater. He fell. The impact with the stone floor should have hurt, but Jon felt nothing. The pain in his head consumed everything else. He was dimly aware of people shouting, hands grabbing him, Maester Luwin's voice calling for space, and then the memories came. Not memories of Winterfell, not memories of training in the yard with Robb, or reading in the library, or hiding from Catelyn's cold stares. Different memories, impossible memories, the smell of river water, the Trident, swollen with rain, rushing past in a torrent, the weight of armor, a rubied breastplate that caught the light like drops of blood, a warhammer, massive and terrible, swinging toward him. He tried to raise his sword. Too slow. The impact. Ribs shattering, breastplate crumpling inward, rubies scattering across the riverbank like crimson tears. Robert Baratheon's face, young, furious, screaming, pain, darkness, death. And before that, a tower in Dorne, pale stone rising from red mountains. Lyanna's face, beautiful and dying, her hand clutching his, her voice weak but insistent. If I fall, name him Aegon. He is the prince that was promised. Her eyes pleading, promise me you'll protect him. Promise me, Ned. Arthur Dayne standing guard at the tower door. The Sword of the Morning, the finest knight in the Seven Kingdoms, nodded when given the command. Stay here, protect her, protect the child. The child matters more than my life, more than the throne, more than everything. And further back, the great hall of Harrenhal, the tournament, the crown of winter roses in his hands. Lyanna's face when he rode past his wife to place the crown in her lap. The moment everything changed, the moment he destroyed the realm. Jon Snow's body convulsed on the floor of Winterfell's great hall. Inside, a consciousness that should not exist clawed its way to the surface. I am Rhaegar Targaryen. I died at the Trident. This is my son. This is the North. This is impossible. Jon's eyes opened. Maester Luwin's face hovered above him, lined with concern. Jon, can you hear me? How many fingers am I holding up? 3 fingers. But the voice that should have answered was caught in his throat, strangled by the weight of 2 lifetimes pressing against each other. He knew this man. Maester Luwin, who had taught him his letters, who had been patient when other maesters would have dismissed a bastard's education. But he also knew maesters from another life. Grand Maester Pycelle, who had served his father Aerys. Maester Cresson at Dragonstone. 3, Jon whispered. His voice sounded wrong to his own ears. Too young, too northern. Good, that's good. Lewin helped him sit up. The crowd of concerned faces pulled back slightly. Jon saw Robb pushing through the throng, his brother's face pale with worry. Theon Greyjoy stood behind him, looking more curious than concerned. Lady Catelyn remained at the high table, watching with an expression Rhaegar could not quite read. "I'm fine," Jon said. He got to his feet, refusing help. His legs felt strange, too short. His hands, when he looked at them, were smaller than they should be. A boy's hands, not a man's. He was 14 years old. In his memories, Rhaegar's memories, he had been 24 when he died. A lifetime ago. A lifetime that had somehow become his. "You collapsed," Robb said, gripping Jon's shoulder. "Are you ill? Should we call for?" I said I'm fine. The words came out sharper than intended. Rhaegar had never been sharp with people he cared about. He had been melancholic, yes. Distant, certainly. But not cruel. He forced his voice to soften. "I apologize, Robb. I just need air." His gait felt wrong. The northern boots, the heavy furs, the cold stone beneath his feet, everything was wrong. He had lived in the Red Keep, in Dragonstone, in the warmth of the South. The North was foreign to him, and yet this body knew it intimately. Jon Snow had been born here, raised here. This was home. But Rhaegar Targaryen had never had a true home. Outside, the night air hit him like a slap. Winterfell's courtyard was empty, the snow falling in soft, silent flakes. Jon stood in the darkness and tried to understand what had happened to him. He was dead. He knew he was dead. He remembered the warhammer crushing his chest, remembered falling into the Trident's cold water, remembered the darkness that followed. There had been nothing after that, no light, no gods, no afterlife, just void. And now he was here, in his son's body, 15 years after his death. Why? The question had no answer. Jon walked across the courtyard, his feet carrying him without conscious thought. He found himself at the entrance to the crypts. The stone steps led down into darkness, into the place where the Stark dead slept. He descended. The crypts were ancient. The statues of dead Starks lined the walls, stone lords and kings with iron swords across their laps. Jon had been here before, as a child when Ned brought him to teach him the history of the house, but Rhaegar had never set foot in this place. These were not his ancestors. These were the wolves who had fought against the dragons. At the deepest level, in a place of honor that spoke to how much Ned had loved his sister, stood Lyanna's statue. Jon stopped before it. The stonework was crude compared to the sculptures in the south, but the face was unmistakable, beautiful, sad. The sister Ned had lost, the woman Rhaegar had loved, the mother of the body he now inhabited. "Lyanna," he whispered to the stone. His voice echoed in the darkness. No answer came, only silence and the distant drip of water somewhere in the depths. "I destroyed you. I destroyed everything." The thought was bitter. In life, Rhaegar had believed himself righteous. The prophecies had spoken of a prince that was promised, of a song of ice and fire, of a threat from the north that would consume the world if not opposed. He had believed himself chosen, special, necessary. And so he had pursued Lyanna Stark, believing their union would produce the promised prince. He had crowned her queen of love and beauty at Harrenhal, ignoring his wife Elia. He had taken Lyanna to the Tower of Joy, believing it destiny. Robert's rebellion had been the result. Tens of thousands dead. The Targaryen dynasty overthrown. His father Aerys, mad and terrible, killed by Jaime Lannister. His wife Elia and their children murdered by Gregor Clegane. The realm torn apart. All because Rhaegar Targaryen had believed in prophecy more than he believed in duty. And now he was back. Given a second chance in the body of the son who had resulted from his greatest mistake, the question remained, why? Footsteps on the stairs. Jon turned. Eddard Stark descended into the crypts, a torch in his hand. The Lord of Winterfell's face was grave. He had always been grave in Rhaegar's memory. Even at the Trident, fighting for Robert's cause, Ned Stark had not smiled. He had simply done his duty. "Jon," Ned said quietly, "Maester Lewin said you came this way. Are you well? Who had lied to the entire realm, claimed him as a bastard, endured his wife's hatred? All to keep a promise to a dying sister. You kept your promise, Eddard." The words formed on Jon's lips, but he did not speak them yet. Not yet. He needed to be certain, needed to understand what he was before he revealed it. "I had a strange dream," Jon said carefully. During the collapse, I dreamed of a tower, a woman dying, 3 men in white cloaks standing guard. Ned's face went white. The torch wavered in his hand. What? I dreamed of the Tower of Joy. The silence that followed was absolute. Ned stared at him, and Jon saw the fear in his eyes, the calculation, the rapid assessment of threat. Finally, Ned spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. How do you know that name? I don't know. I saw it, in the dream. A woman in a bed of blood. She was dying. She made someone promise to protect her child. Jon took a step closer. She said, if Robert finds out, he'll kill him. You have to protect him. Ned dropped the torch. It clattered on the stone floor, still burning, casting wild shadows across Lyanna's statue. That's impossible. No one knows those words. No one but you and Howland Reed. I know. Jon's voice was calm now. Steady. This was the moment. The proof that would either convince Ned or doom him. I know because I was there, Lord Stark, not in body, but in memory. I remember what happened at that tower. I remember what was said. Jon, you're not making sense. You're ill. The collapse affected your mind. I told Arthur Dayne to stay at the tower, Jon interrupted. I told him not to follow me to the Trident. I told him the child mattered more than my life. Those were my words, Lord Stark. Rhaegar Targaryen's words. And only he and Arthur would have known them. He didn't draw it, but his fingers wrapped around the hilt. What are you saying? I'm saying that when I collapsed in the Great Hall, I remembered things that Jon Snow should not know. I remembered dying at the Trident. I remembered Robert's warhammer crushing my chest. I remembered everything. Jon met Ned's eyes without flinching. I am Rhaegar Targaryen, Lord Stark. I woke up in the body of my son. For a long moment, Ned simply stared. Then, slowly, he drew his sword. Ice, the great sword of House Stark, gleamed in the torchlight. You're speaking madness, Ned said, but his voice shook. My nephew Jon is a boy of 14. You are not. You cannot be. Test me. Ask me something only Rhaegar. We fought on opposite sides. Then ask me about Lyanna. Ask me what I told her before I left for the Trident. What did you tell her? I told her that if I fell, she should name the child Aegon, after Aegon the Conqueror, because he would be the prince that was promised, the one who would unite the realm against the darkness from the north. Jon's voice dropped to a whisper. I was wrong about many things, Lord Stark, but I was right about the threat. It's coming, the long night, the others, everything the old stories speak of, and we have perhaps 3 years to prepare. Ned lowered his sword slightly. The others are legend, children's tales. So were dragons, once. So were direwolves. Jon gestured to the crypts around them. Your children found direwolf pups in the snow. 6 of them, 1 for each of the Stark children, including me. That's not chance, Lord Stark. That's a sign. The old magic is waking up. And when it does, the dead will wake with it. This is impossible. I know. I've been telling myself that since I woke up. Jon took a step forward. Ned raised the sword again, but didn't strike. I don't expect you to trust me. I don't expect you to forgive the man I was. Rhaegar Targaryen destroyed your family, started a war that killed your father and brother. I know what I did, and I've had 15 years in the Void to understand my mistakes. The Void? There was nothing after I died, no gods, no light, just darkness. And then I woke up here, in this body, with all my memories intact. Jon's hand spread. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I know what I need to do. I need to save the realm I destroyed. I need to prepare for the true enemy. And I need your help to do it. Ned's breathing was harsh. If you are truly Rhaegar, prove it. Tell me something no one else could know. Jon thought for a moment. Then he spoke, reciting words from memory. At Harrenhal, I played a song for the lords assembled. The Dance of the Dragons, a sad song about the Targaryen civil war. Afterward, Lord Went asked me why I chose such a melancholy tune for a celebration. I told him, all songs are sad, my lord. We sing of things lost and things we will never have. You were there, Lord Stark. You heard me say those words. Ned's sword point dropped to the ground. His face had gone from white to gray. Gods, it's true. You really are. I am the consciousness of a dead prince in the body of his bastard son. I am what should be impossible. Jon knelt before Ned. You kept your promise, Eddard. You protected the prince when the wolves and lions failed. You raised him as your own. endured dishonor and your wife's hatred to keep him safe. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I ask for your help." Ned stared down at him. Then, slowly, he sheathed ice. "Stand up. Whatever you are, you don't kneel to me." Jon rose. They stood facing each other in the crypts before Lyanna's statue, two men carrying impossible secrets. "If word of this spreads," Ned said quietly, "Robert will kill you." He hated Rhaegar more than he hated Aerys. If he suspects for even a moment, I know. That's why I'm telling you first. You're the only person I can trust with this. Can you control it? The memories? The mannerisms? Robert knew Rhaegar, fought him. If you speak like him, move like him, he'll notice. I'm trying, but the memories are strong, and some things are instinct. Jon flexed his hands. I keep expecting these hands to be larger, to hold a sword differently. I keep expecting to speak in High Valyrian without thinking. Then you need to be careful, more careful than you've ever been. Ned placed a hand on Jon's shoulder. I don't fully understand what's happened to you, but I believe you. And if you truly have Rhaegar's knowledge, we need to talk about many things, but not here, not now. Tomorrow we'll speak in private. For tonight, return to your chambers. Act as Jon Snow would act. Give me time to think. Jon nodded. He turned to leave, then stopped. Lord Stark, one more thing. In my memories, King Robert will arrive at Winterfell soon. Within days, he comes to offer you the position of Hand of the King. How do you know this? Because Rhaegar heard the rumors before he died. Jon Arryn was growing old, Robert would need a new hand, and there was only one man he trusted enough. Jon met Ned's eyes. When he comes, he'll ask you to go south, to King's Landing. In my old life, in the timeline I remember from before, that journey led to your death. They're more dangerous than you know. Cersei and Jaime are lovers. Their children are bastards born of incest. When you discover this truth, they'll have you arrested for treason. And Joffrey, the boy who should not be king, will order your execution. That's madness. Robert would never allow. Robert will be dead. Killed by a boar on a hunting trip. The wine will be too strong, the boar too fierce, and you'll be alone in King's Landing, surrounded by enemies. Jon's voice was urgent. I can stop it. All of it. But I need you to trust me. I need you to bring me south with you when Robert makes his offer. You want to go to King's Landing? I want to save your life, and in doing so, save the realm. Ned studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. We'll speak more of this tomorrow. For now, return to your chambers. And Jon, or Rhaegar, whoever you are, be careful. The walls have ears, even in Winterfell. Jon climbed the stairs and emerged into the courtyard. The snow had stopped falling. The night was clear and cold. The stars bright overhead. Somewhere in the castle, a wolf howled, his dire wolf. Ghost, the white wolf with red eyes that had come to him in the snow. He walked to his chambers, his mind racing. Inside, he was Rhaegar Targaryen, 24 years old, a prince who had died trying to fulfill a prophecy. Outside, he was Jon Snow, 14 years old, a bastard boy with no future. He would need to become both, and neither. The next 3 days passed in a strange haze. Jon moved through Winterfell as he always had, taking care to act as Jon Snow would act. He trained in the yard with Robb and Theon, fighting with the northern style he'd been taught. He ate meals at the bastard's table. He avoided Lady Catelyn's gaze. He played with Bran and Rickon, listening to their excited chatter about nothing important. But inside, Rhaegar's memories gnawed at him. He found himself noticing things he'd never noticed before. The way servants moved through the castle, the rhythms of Winterfell's daily life, the strategic vulnerabilities in the castle's defenses. These were things a prince would notice, things a bastard boy would ignore. He also found himself fighting the urge to speak differently, to use formal Valyrian cadences instead of northern simplicity, to quote prophecies and histories that Jon Snow should not know. On the second day, he made a mistake. He was in the library with Maester Luwin, supposedly studying the history of the first men. Luwin made a comment about the children of the forest, calling them myths. They were real, Jon said without thinking. The children existed. They created the White Walkers as weapons against the first men during the war. But the magic got away from them. The Walkers turned on their creators. Luwin stared at him. Jon, that's not in any text I've shown you. Where did you read that? I must have read it somewhere else, one of the old books in the back of the library. And that version of the story, Lewin's eyes narrowed. That's a very specific interpretation of events that supposedly happened 8,000 years ago. Forgive me, Maester. Lewin didn't look convinced, but he let it pass. After the lesson, Jon was more careful. He needed to filter his knowledge through what Jon Snow should realistically know. On the third day, disaster nearly struck in a different way. He was walking through the covered bridge between the armory and the Great Keep when he heard music. Someone was playing a harp in one of the storage rooms. Badly. The notes were discordant, the timing off. Without thinking, Jon pushed open the door. Inside, a serving girl was attempting to tune an old harp that had been stored away. She looked up, startled. "Lord Snow, I'm sorry, I was just... May I?" Jon gestured to the instrument. The girl handed it over, confused. Jon sat on a crate and positioned the harp against his shoulder. His hands moved to the strings, and then, without conscious thought, he began to play. The melody that emerged was ancient, a Valyrian song, haunting and beautiful. His fingers found the chords with perfect precision, muscle memory guiding them to positions Jon Snow had never learned. The notes filled the small room, crystalline and pure. He played for perhaps 30 seconds before he realized what he was doing. Jon stopped abruptly. His hands trembled on the strings. The serving girl was staring at him with wide eyes. "That was beautiful, my lord. I didn't know you could play." "I can't," Jon said quickly. He thrust the harp back at her. I was trying something I read about. It didn't really work." He left before she could respond. His heart hammered in his chest. That had been incredibly stupid. If word spread that Jon Snow could play the harp like a master, questions would be asked. Questions he couldn't answer. That evening Ned summoned him to his solar. The Lord of Winterfell sat behind his desk, a raven scroll in front of him. When Jon entered, Ned gestured for him to close the door and sit. "Robert arrives tomorrow," Ned said without preamble. "The raven just came, a day earlier than expected." Jon felt his stomach tighten. Robert Baratheon, the man who had killed him, the usurper, the demon of the Trident. "How do you feel?" Ned asked quietly. "Afraid," Jon admitted. "I remember dying by his hand. I remember the warhammer, the pain. And tomorrow I'll stand in front of him and pretend to be a bastard boy he won't notice. Can you do it?" "I have to." Ned leaned back in his chair. "We need to establish rules, things you can and cannot do while Robert is here." "I agree. First, you avoid him as much as possible. You're a bastard. He won't expect to see you at the high table or in his presence. Stay in the background." "Understood." "Second, if you must speak to him, keep your words simple, northern, blunt. Don't use any of your Rhaegar's speech patterns." "I'll try." "Don't spar in the yard while he's watching. If he sees you move the way Rhaegar moved, he'll know." Robert studied Rhaegar's fighting style for years, trying to find weaknesses. He'll recognize it. That made sense. Robert had trained specifically to kill Rhaegar. He would notice techniques and stances that shouldn't exist in a 14-year-old bastard. "And fourth," Ned said gravely, "if at any point he suspects, if he even looks at you strangely, you run. You take Ghost and you ride for the wall. I'll claim you stole a horse. Better Robert thinks you a coward and a thief than what you actually are." "I won't run." "You will if I command it. I didn't protect you for 15 years just to watch Robert kill you in my own hall." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Jon spoke. "Lord Stark, when Robert offers you the hand's position, you need to accept it." Ned's jaw tightened. "You said that path leads to my death. It does, in the old timeline. But this time will be different. This time, I'll be with you. And I know things that can keep you alive." "What things?" "I know about the Lannisters' incest. I know where Jon Arryn's research is hidden. I know who murdered him." Jon leaned forward. "The old timeline failed because no one knew the truth until it was too late. This time we'll know from the beginning. We'll have the advantage. And if something goes wrong, if your knowledge isn't enough, then we improvise. But staying in the north won't save you. It won't save anyone. The realm is broken, Lord Stark. The Lannisters are cancerous. The small council is corrupt. And in 3 years, maybe less, the White Walkers will come. If we don't fix the realm before that happens, everyone dies. This is madness. All of it. I know. But it's the madness we have." A knock on the door interrupted them. Ned called out permission to enter. Maester Lewin stepped inside, his face troubled. "My lord, there's something you should know. One of the serving girls came to me with a strange tale. She says she heard Jon playing a harp, and not simple songs, complex Valyrian melodies. Is that so? The girl was quite insistent. She said Jon played like a master musician, like someone who'd trained for years. Lewin looked at Jon. Is this true? I picked up the harp and tried a few notes. I must have gotten lucky, or the girl was exaggerating. Jon doesn't know how to play the harp, Ned said firmly. The girl must have been mistaken, or perhaps she was trying to make herself important by spreading tales. Lewin didn't look convinced, but he nodded. As you say, my lord, I simply thought you should know. When the maester left, Ned turned to Jon with a hard stare. You played a harp? In front of a witness? It was instinct. My hands moved before I could stop them. Then you need to keep your hands away from harps and any other instruments. Rhaegar was famous for his music. If you start playing like he did, people will notice. I understand. Do you? Because one slip like that in front of Robert and you're dead. Do you understand that? Yes. You're fighting against instincts 15 years in the making. But you need to be smarter, more careful. Jon Snow is a quiet, sullen bastard who spends his time in the practice yard and the library. He doesn't play music. He doesn't speak High Valyrian. He doesn't know the secrets of the Tower of Joy. Remember that. The harp incident could have been disastrous if it reached the wrong ears. He needed to be Jon Snow, completely, convincingly, even if Rhaegar Targaryen screamed inside his skull. The next morning the horns sounded. The king was coming. Jon stood in the courtyard with the rest of Winterfell's household, arranged by rank and importance. The highborn stood near the front, the servants and bastards in the back. Jon positioned himself behind a group of stable hands, half hidden by their bulk. The gates opened, the royal procession entered. First came the Kingsguard in their white cloaks. Ser Barristan Selmy rode at the front, old but still commanding on his horse. Jon's breath caught. Barristan the Bold. He'd known him, fought beside him, trusted him. Behind the Kingsguard came the royal wheelhouse, gilded and ridiculous, and then, on a horse too small for his bulk, Robert Baratheon. The king had grown fat, massively fat. His face was red from drinking, his beard unkempt. He looked nothing like the warrior who had crushed Rhaegar's chest at the Trident. Time and excess had destroyed him, but when Robert dismounted and embraced Ned, Jon saw a flash of the old strength. The warrior wasn't completely gone, just buried under years of wine and self-indulgence. Ned, Robert's voice boomed across the courtyard. You got fat. The irony of Robert saying that while his own belly hung over his belt was apparently lost on the king. Ned smiled, a rare expression, and returned the embrace. Your Grace, Winterfell is yours. Behind Robert came the Lannisters. Queen Cersei stepped from the wheelhouse, beautiful and cold, looking at Winterfell like it was covered in filth. Jaime Lannister rode beside the wheelhouse, golden and handsome, the Kingslayer himself. And the children, Joffrey, already sneering at everything he saw, Myrcella and Tommen, young and uncertain. Jon studied Joffrey. In his memories, in the timeline he knew, that boy would become king, would order Ned's execution, would torture Sansa, would start a war that tore the realm apart. Not this time. The royal party dismounted, introductions were made. Jon watched from his position in the back, trying to remain invisible, and then Robert's eyes swept across the assembled household, looking, searching. They fell on Jon for just a moment. Jon felt his heart stop. Robert's gaze was unfocused, half drunk already, but there was something in it, recognition, curiosity. It was impossible to tell. Then Robert's attention moved on, and Jon released the breath he'd been holding. The king hadn't noticed yet. That evening there was a feast to welcome Robert and his party. The great hall was packed. Every lord and lady in Winterfell attended. Musicians played. Wine flowed. Robert sat at the high table, drinking and laughing and telling stories of the rebellion. Jon sat at the bastard's table alone, picking at his food. And then a shadow fell across him. Jon looked up. Tyrion Lannister stood there, cup of wine in hand, a sardonic smile on his face. So you're the bastard, Tyrion said. He pulled out a chair and sat without waiting for permission. Jon Snow, Ned Stark's shame made flesh. How does it feel? Perhaps the cleverest person in the room. He would notice inconsistencies. It feels like being a bastard, my lord, Jon said flatly. Northern, simple. You have the look of a Stark. All except the eyes. Those are different. I have my mother's eyes, or so I'm told. And who was your mother? Ned won't say. Very mysterious. I don't know. Don't you want to know? Jon Snow would want to know, would have spent 14 years wondering who his mother was. But Rhaegar knew the truth, knew exactly who Lyanna Stark was, knew the price she'd paid. Wanting something doesn't make it true, Jon said carefully. I'm a bastard. My mother was likely some serving girl or camp follower. Knowing her name won't change what I am. Tyrion's eyes narrowed. That's very philosophical for a boy of your age. Mistake. Jon had spoken too much like Rhaegar. He shrugged. I read a lot. Do you? What do you read? History. The lives of the first men. The long night. The age of heroes. Interesting choices. Most boys your age read about knights and tournaments. Tales of glory. I'm a bastard. Glory isn't for me. Tyrion laughed. It was a bitter sound. No. I suppose it isn't. Well, Jon Snow, you and I have something in common then. We're both disappointments to our fathers. Both judged for things we cannot control. Both relegated to the margins while our betters celebrate. He raised his cup in a mock toast. Jon raised his in return. They drank. Tell me, Tyrion said, leaning closer, if you could be anything other than what you are, what would you choose? The question hung in the air. Jon thought about it. Rhaegar had been a prince. He'd had everything. Power, respect, and it had all turned to ash. I'd be useful, Jon said finally. Not important, just useful. Someone who could help people. So I'm told. Before Tyrion could respond, a commotion erupted at the high table. Robert was calling for entertainment. The musicians scrambled to their instruments. Play something lively, Robert commanded. Something to make me forget I'm in this frozen wasteland. The musicians began a drinking song. Simple, loud, the kind of thing Robert would enjoy. But Robert wasn't satisfied. He waved them to silence. No, something better. Something. What was that song? The one Rhaegar used to play, the Dragon One. The hall went silent. Ned's face had gone pale. Your Grace, one of the musicians said nervously. I don't know. The Dragon's Lament, Robert said. That was it. The sad one about the Targaryen Civil War. I heard it at a feast once, years ago. Beautiful song. Tragic. Someone play it. Can no one in this hall play a proper song? Robert bellowed. From his position at the bastard's table, Jon felt ice in his veins. The Dragon's Lament. That was Rhaegar's song. He'd composed it himself. He'd played it at Harrenhal, at the great tournament. Robert had heard it there. And if Jon admitted he knew it, Robert would ask how a northern bastard learned a Targaryen composition. Perhaps a different song, Your Grace, Ned suggested quickly. Something more suited to northern tastes. Bah. Fine. Play whatever you like. The musicians launched into a safer tune. The moment passed, but Jon felt Tyrion's eyes on him. You're very quiet suddenly, the dwarf observed. What's wrong? Nothing. Just tired. The feast continued late into the night. Jon endured it in silence, speaking only when spoken to, keeping his answers short and northern. When he finally escaped to his chambers, he found Ghost waiting for him. The white direwolf had grown larger in recent days, nearly the size of a small pony. Jon buried his hands in Ghost's fur and breathed. The wolf's warmth was comforting, real. We survived the first day, he whispered to the direwolf. Only gods know how many more we'll need to survive. Ghost made no answer, but his red eyes gleamed in the darkness, intelligent and knowing. Tomorrow, Jon knew, Robert would ask Ned to be his hand. Tomorrow, the real game would begin, and Jon Snow, Rhaegar Targaryen, would need to be cleverer than he'd ever been to survive it. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but Rhaegar's memories wouldn't let him rest. They played out behind his eyelids like ghosts. The Tower of Joy, Lyanna dying, Arthur Dayne falling, Robert's warhammer descending. I died once to learn how to live, Jon thought. Let's hope I learned the right lessons. Outside his window, snow began to fall again. Winter was coming, and with it, all the dangers he remembered. The morning after the feast, Jon woke to the sound of steel on steel. He dressed quickly and went to the window. In the practice yard below, Robb and Theon were sparring with blunted swords. Joffrey Baratheon stood to the side with his mother, watching with poorly concealed disdain. Sir Roderick Cassel, the master-at-arms, called out corrections. Jon knew he should stay away. Ned's warning echoed in his mind. Don't fight in front of Robert. Don't let him see you move like Rhaegar. But as he watched, Joffrey stepped forward. Let me try, the prince said. His voice carried the arrogance of a boy who'd never been denied anything. Ser Roderick hesitated. "Your Grace? Perhaps after you've warmed up." I said, "Let me try." Joffrey took a practice sword from the weapons rack. "Who will face the prince?" Robb stepped forward, but Cersei's voice cut across the yard. "Not Lord Stark's heir. Someone more appropriate." Her eyes swept across the yard and landed on Jon, standing at his window. Even from this distance he could see her calculating smile. "The bastard," she said. "Let Joffrey face Ned's bastard." Refusing would be an insult to the prince, but accepting meant fighting in front of the royal party. Robert was somewhere in the castle, probably still sleeping off last night's wine, but others would watch, others would report. He had no choice. Jon descended to the yard. The morning air was cold enough to see his breath. He crossed to where Ser Roderick stood and took a practice sword from the rack. Joffrey smirked at him. "So you're the bastard. You look like a Stark, except for the eyes." "Whose eyes are those?" "My mother's, Your Grace." Jon kept his voice flat, northern, empty of emotion. "A tavern wench, I'd wager. Or a camp follower. That's usually where bastards come from. Don't react. Don't give him anything. As you say, Your Grace." Joffrey's smirk widened. "Let's see if you can fight as well as your true-born brother." They took positions. Ser Roderick called the engagement. Joffrey attacked immediately, his form terrible. He swung wildly, putting all his strength into every blow. No technique, no control, just aggression and entitlement. Jon blocked easily. The instinct to counterattack surged through him. Rhaegar's training, years of practice with Arthur Dayne and Barristan Selmy, screamed at him to disarm the boy with a simple wrist twist and riposte. But Jon Snow wouldn't know that technique. Jon Snow had been trained by Ser Roderick Cassel in the northern style. Direct, brutal, effective. Jon blocked another wild swing and stepped back. Let Joffrey tire himself. The prince's breathing was already labored. He had no stamina, no conditioning. A few more exchanges, and he'd be done. "Stand still, bastard," Joffrey snarled. Jon let the next attack through his guard deliberately. The blunted blade caught him on the shoulder hard enough to bruise. He grunted and stumbled back. "There," Joffrey crowed. "First blood to the prince." "Well struck, Your Grace," Jon said. He lowered his sword. "You fight well." Cersei applauded from the sidelines, crisis averted. Jon had lost without revealing any of Rhaegar's skill, but then another voice called out from across the yard. "Is that the best Winterfell can offer?" Jon turned. Jaime Lannister stood at the edge of the practice yard, resplendent in his Kingsguard armor. The Kingslayer, the man who had murdered Aerys II, the finest swordsman in the Seven Kingdoms. "I'll give the northern boys a proper lesson," Jaime said. He drew his practice sword and walked onto the field. "Come, bastard. Let's see what you can do against a real opponent." Jon's heart hammered. This was different. Joffrey was a child playing at war. Jaime was a warrior, a killer. And he would notice if Jon fought with techniques he shouldn't know. "Ser Jaime," Jon said carefully, "I'm not worthy to wait balanced. Be ready to react, not to initiate." Jaime attacked with casual arrogance. A testing strike, not meant to overwhelm, just to gauge skill. Jon blocked it. Barely. Jaime was fast. Faster than anyone Jon had sparred with in this body. The second strike came quicker. Jon blocked again, but the impact jarred his wrists. Jaime was toying with him, feeling out his defenses. "You're slow," Jaime observed. "But your form isn't terrible. Who taught you?" "But limited," Jaime struck again. A series of quick blows that drove Jon backward. "You fight like every Northman I've ever seen. All defense, no artistry." Jon gritted his teeth and held his ground. He could see the openings in Jaime's technique, could see exactly where to counterstrike. Rhaegar had fought beside Jaime's father, had trained with similar Westerland techniques. He knew how to exploit them. But Jon Snow wouldn't. Jaime's next attack was a feint to the left followed by a low strike to the right. Jon blocked the feint and took the second blow on his thigh. He stumbled. Jaime's sword point came to rest against his throat. "Dead," Jaime said. "You fell for the oldest trick in the book." Jon lowered his sword. "I have much to learn, Sir Jaime." "Indeed." Jaime stepped back, but his eyes were curious. "Though your blocking was better than I expected, you have good instincts. With proper training, you might actually be dangerous." Before Jon could respond, another voice cut across the yard. "Jaime, stop playing with the boy and come break your fast." Cersei stood at the edge of the yard, beautiful and cold in a green dress. Jaime sheathed his practice blade immediately. Coming, sister. He turned back to Jon. Practice more, bastard. You have potential. As Jaime walked away, Jon saw Robb approaching. You let him win, Robb said quietly. I saw it. You could have blocked that last strike. I'm a bastard sparring with a Kingsguard knight. Of course he won. No, I mean you deliberately let him through your guard. Why? Jon looked at his half-brother, at the concern and confusion on Robb's face. They'd grown up together. Trained together, Robb knew how Jon fought. It seemed polite, Jon said finally. To lose to a Kingsguard. Robb's frown deepened. You're acting strange, Jon. Ever since you collapsed at the feast. Are you sure you're well? I'm fine. You don't seem fine. You seem different. Different how? I don't know. The way you stand? The way you look at people? Even the way you talk sometimes. It's like Robb trailed off searching for words. Like you're playing a part, pretending to be someone you're not. Jon's blood ran cold. If Robb noticed, others would too. He needed to be more careful, more convincing. I'm just tired, Jon said. The feast, the king's arrival, it's all been overwhelming. Robb didn't look convinced, but he let it drop. Father wants to see you, in his solar. Now. Jon climbed the stairs to Ned's solar with growing apprehension. When he entered, he found not just Ned, but Robert Baratheon as well. The king sat in a chair by the fire, a cup of wine already in his hand despite the early hour. He looked older in daylight, the lines on his face deeper, the gray in his beard more pronounced. Jon Snow, Robert said. Ned's bastard. Come here, boy. Jon approached cautiously. He kept his eyes down, his posture subservient. A bastard in the presence of the king. Look at me. Robert studied him with an intensity that made Jon's skin crawl. This was the man who had killed him, the man whose warhammer had crushed Rhaegar's breastplate. The demon of the Trident. You have the Stark look, Robert said finally. All except the eyes. Dark eyes, not Tully blue, not Stark gray. Whose eyes are those? I don't know, Your Grace. I never knew my mother. Robert grunted. He took a long drink of wine. Ned won't speak of her. I've asked him 100 times over the years. He just says it was during the war, a moment of weakness. But Ned Stark doesn't have moments of weakness, does he? The question hung in the air. Jon said nothing. Leave the boy alone, Robert, Ned said quietly. He knows nothing of his mother. I've told him the same as I've told you. You're too secretive, Ned, always were. Robert waved a hand dismissively. Fine. Keep your secrets. I didn't come here to talk about your bastard anyway. He stood suddenly serious. Ned, I need you. The realm needs you. Jon Arryn is dead. I need a new hand. Your Grace, I'm honored, but I'm not asking. I'm telling. You're the only man I trust. The only man who gives a damn about something other than gold and power. Robert's voice dropped. I'm drowning, Ned. Surrounded by Lannisters and sycophants. I need a friend. I need you. Jon watched Ned's face, saw the conflict there, the duty to his friend, warring with the desire to stay in the north with his family. Let me think on it, Ned said. Think quickly, we leave in a week. Robert left the solar, the door closed behind him. Ned sat heavily in his chair. He'll insist, Jon said quietly, and you'll have to go. I know. Ned looked up at him. Which means you need to prepare. If you're coming south, we need to establish your cover story. Who you are, what you're doing in King's Landing. Make me your personal advisor, a bastard with a gift for strategy and history, someone you trust to handle research and correspondence. That might work, but it puts you close to the court, close to danger. That's where I need to be. I can't protect you from Winterfell. Over the next 3 days, preparations began for the journey south. Ned formally accepted Robert's offer. The royal party would leave in 4 days, and the Stark household would accompany them. Sansa was excited. She would be betrothed to Joffrey, become a princess. Arya was sullen. She hated the idea of going south. Bran wanted to stay and climb. Catelyn would remain in Winterfell with Rickon. Jon spent those days carefully avoiding the royal party. He stayed in the library, supposedly studying. He trained alone in the early mornings before anyone else woke. He kept to the shadows. But on the 3rd day, disaster struck. Jon was walking through the covered bridge between the armory and the Great Keep when he heard music. Someone was playing a harp. He stopped, listening. The melody was simple, a northern folk song. But the technique was terrible. Wrong fingering, poor rhythm. Before he could stop himself, Jon pushed open the door to the storage room where the sound originated. A serving girl sat with an old harp, struggling through the tune. She looked up, startled. "Lord Snow, I was just—" "May I?" Jon held out his hand for the instrument. The girl handed it over. Jon sat on a crate and positioned the harp against his shoulder. The wood was old but well made. His hands found the strings, and then, without thinking, he began to play. The melody that flowed from his fingers was nothing like the simple folk song the girl had been attempting. This was a Valyrian composition, ancient and complex. The Tears of Lys, a song about poison and betrayal. Rhaegar had learned it from his mother Rhaella when he was young. Jon's fingers danced across the strings. The music filled the small room, each note perfect, crystalline. He felt the muscle memory taking over completely, 15 years of practice guiding movements Jon Snow had never made. He played for perhaps a minute before awareness crashed back. Jon stopped abruptly. His hands trembled on the strings. The serving girl stared at him with wide eyes and an open mouth. That was beautiful, my lord. I didn't know you could play like that. Like a master. Like a prince. Like Rhaegar Targaryen. I can't, Jon said quickly. He thrust the harp back at her. I was just trying something I read about. It didn't really work. The sound was terrible. But, my lord, it was perfect. I've never heard anything so. It was nothing. Forget about it, please. Jon stood. And don't mention this to anyone. I don't want people to think I'm putting on airs. A bastard shouldn't. Just don't tell anyone. He left before she could respond. His heart hammered in his chest. That had been catastrophically stupid. If word spread that Jon Snow could play Valyrian compositions like a master harpist, questions would multiply. Questions he couldn't answer. He needed to find Ned immediately, but when Jon reached Ned's solar, he found voices inside. The door was slightly ajar. Jon stopped outside, listening. "Just saying the boy is strange," Maester Luwin's voice. His collapse at the feast, the way he speaks sometimes. And now this business with the harp. A serving girl came to me. She claimed she heard Jon playing a harp in one of the storage rooms. Not simple songs. Complex Valyrian melodies. She said he played like a master musician, like someone who'd trained for years. Jon closed his eyes. The girl had talked. Of course she had. Servants gossiped. It was inevitable. "That's impossible," Ned said. "Jon doesn't know how to play the harp." That's what I told her. But she was quite insistent. She described the song in detail, an old Valyrian piece called The Tears of Lys. "I know that song, Lord Stark. It's extraordinarily difficult. Only a trained musician could play it." Then Ned spoke, his voice carefully neutral. The girl must have been mistaken. Perhaps Jon picked up the harp and made some noise, and she exaggerated it in her mind. You know how servants like to embellish. Perhaps. But there's something else. Jon's knowledge has become unusual. In our lessons, he makes references to texts he shouldn't have read, offers interpretations of history that are too sophisticated for his age and education, and his vocabulary has changed. He uses words and phrases more suited to a southern court than a northern bastard. He reads extensively. He's always been clever. It's as if he's had an education he shouldn't possess, as if someone taught him things beyond what I've provided. Who would do that? I don't know, but I'm concerned, my lord. The collapse, the behavioral changes, the impossible skills. Something is wrong with Jon Snow. He slipped away from the door and retreated to his chambers. Ghost was there, lying by the fire. The direwolf raised his head as Jon entered. "I'm making mistakes," Jon whispered to the wolf. "Too many mistakes." He paced the room. Luwin was suspicious. The serving girl had talked. Soon others would notice the inconsistencies, the way he moved, the way he spoke, the knowledge he shouldn't have. He needed to be more careful, needed to suppress Rhaegar's instincts completely, become Jon Snow so thoroughly that the prince disappeared. But how? Every moment of every day, Rhaegar's memories pressed against his consciousness. Rhaegar's skills demanded to be used. It was like trying to forget how to breathe. A knock on the door. Jon tensed. "Come in." He closed the door behind him and leaned against it. "Luwin told me about the harp." "I know. I heard. I told you to stay away from anything that would draw attention, and you played a Valyrian composition in front of a witness?" My hands moved before I could stop them. The muscle memory is too strong. I see a harp and I know exactly how to play it. I can't unknow that. Away from anything that triggers those instincts. Ned crossed the room. I've managed to convince Lewin that the girl was exaggerating. But I can't keep making excuses for you. Sooner or later, someone will notice. Someone who isn't as willing to dismiss the evidence. I know, I'm trying. Because if you slip like this in King's Landing in front of people who knew Rhaegar, they'll figure it out. And when they do, Robert will kill you. Ned's expression softened slightly. I understand this is difficult. You're fighting against 15 years of memory and habit, but you have to win that fight. Jon Snow's life depends on it. Jon nodded. I'll be more careful, I promise. Good. Now there's something else we need to discuss, Bran. What about him? Keep an eye on things here. Jon's stomach dropped. He knew what came next. In the original timeline, Bran had climbed the broken tower during the hunt, had seen Jaime and Cersei together, had been pushed. No, Jon said. You need to go on the hunt, and I need to stay here. Why? Because something's going to happen tomorrow. Something involving Bran and the Lannisters. I need to be here to stop it. Ned's eyes narrowed. What's going to happen? About the broken tower, about Jaime and Cersei's incest, about Bran climbing and seeing them together, about the push that would cripple him for life. When Jon finished, Ned's face was ashen. They would murder a child to hide their crimes? Jaime would. To protect Cersei. To protect their secret. Jon leaned forward. But this time, I can stop it. I know exactly when it will happen, where Bran will be. I can prevent it. How? I'll follow Bran. When he starts climbing, I'll be there. And when Jaime and Cersei meet in the tower, I'll interrupt them before Bran gets close enough to see. That's risky. If you confront them, I won't confront them directly. I'll just make enough noise to warn them someone's coming. They'll stop. Move to a different location. Bran will climb, see nothing, and come back down safely. And if something goes wrong, then I improvise. But I won't let Bran fall. I won't let that happen again. Again, Ned caught the word. You say that as if you've already lived through it once. I have, in my memories, in the timeline I know. Bran fell, survived but couldn't walk. He became something else. Something strange. But he suffered for years because of that fall. Jon met Ned's eyes. I can save him, trust me. Ned was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. I'll go on the hunt. You stay here. Watch Bran. And if the Lannisters try anything, they won't succeed. Not this time. The next morning, the hunting party assembled in the courtyard. Robert was in high spirits, already half drunk. Laughing with his men, Ned rode with them, casting one last look back at Jon before they passed through the gates. Jon watched them go, then he turned his attention to finding Bran. The boy was in the yard with Tommen Baratheon, showing the young prince how to shoot a bow. Bran was patient with Tommen, encouraging, completely unaware of what his older brother Joffrey was truly like. Jon settled in to watch. The morning passed slowly. Bran practiced with Tommen, had lunch, played with Summer, his direwolf pup, normal activities for a normal day. Then, in the early afternoon, Bran looked up at the broken tower. Jon's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment. Bran said something to Tommen about climbing and started walking toward the old tower. Jon followed at a distance, keeping to the shadows. He couldn't stop Bran from climbing. That would be too obvious, too suspicious. But he could be ready. Bran reached the base of the tower and began to climb. The boy moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd scaled these walls 100 times. He was good, natural, fearless. Jon positioned himself below, ready to intervene if needed. He watched Bran ascend, watched the boy find handholds and footholds that seemed impossible. 30 feet up, 40, 50. And then, from the tower above, Jon heard voices. Jaime and Cersei. They were already inside, already together, just as Jon had known they would be. Jon looked up. Bran was climbing toward a window, the same window from Jon's memories. In moments, he would reach it, would peer inside, would see. Jon had to act. He picked up a stone and threw it against the tower wall. Hard. The impact echoed. Above, the voices stopped. What was that? Cersei's voice, sharp with alarm. Someone's outside. Coming. Get dressed. Quickly. Jon threw another stone, then called out, Bran! Bran Stark! Your mother wants you. Come down. Above, he heard rapid movement. Clothing being hastily donned, Bran stopped climbing, looking down. Jon, what are you doing here? Lady Stark wants you. Something about Tommen, she said, to find you immediately. The boy hesitated, looking at the window he'd been climbing toward. Then he shrugged and started descending. Jon waited. A minute later, a different window opened, and Jaime Lannister emerged, fully dressed, looking around suspiciously. He saw Jon standing below. "What are you doing here, bastard?" "Looking for Bran Stark, my lord. His mother wanted him." Jaime's eyes narrowed, but he couldn't prove anything. He nodded curtly and withdrew. Crisis averted. Bran reached the ground. "Where's Mother?" I must have misheard. She was asking for you earlier, but maybe it wasn't urgent." Jon forced a smile. "Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your climb." "It's fine. I can climb any time." They walked back to the castle together. Jon's heart slowly returned to normal. He'd done it. Stopped the fall. Changed the timeline. But as they crossed the courtyard, Jon saw Cersei watching from a window. Her eyes met his. Cold. Calculating. Suspicious. She knew. Maybe not exactly what Jon had done, but she knew he'd interfered, had stopped something. And Cersei Lannister was not someone who forgot such things. That evening, when Ned returned from the hunt, Jon reported everything. They spoke in Ned's solar, behind a locked door. "Bran is safe," Jon said. "The Lannisters didn't get their chance." "You're certain they were together? In the tower?" "I heard their voices, and I saw Jaime afterward. He was suspicious, but he couldn't prove anything." Ned sank into his chair. "Gods, it's true then. Everything you said, the incest, the conspiracy. It's all true, which means we need to be ready. We leave for King's Landing in 2 days. Once we're there, things will move quickly. What do we do about the Lannisters? If Cersei's children aren't Robert's, we gather proof, quietly, without them knowing. Jon Arryn was investigating this before he died. He found evidence. We need to find what he found. And then we present it to Robert. But not until we're ready, not until we have everything in place." Jon leaned forward. In the original timeline, Jon Arryn was poisoned by Littlefinger before he could act on his discovery. "We can't let that happen to you. Littlefinger, the master of coin. You're certain he was involved?" "I know he was. He's been playing a long game, Lord Stark, creating chaos, profiting from war. He murdered Jon Arryn, then manipulated events to start a conflict between Stark and Lannister. Why? Because chaos is a ladder, and Littlefinger wants to climb." Jon's voice was hard. "But this time we'll stop him. We'll expose him before he can do more damage. This is more complex than I thought. The Lannisters, Littlefinger, the threat from the north. How do we manage all of it? One step at a time. First, we survive the journey to King's Landing. Second, we find the evidence Jon Arryn gathered. Third, we neutralize Littlefinger. Fourth, we deal with the Lannisters, and through all of it we prepare for the real war. The White Walkers. Yes, they're coming. In 3 years, maybe less. Everything else is just maneuvering, politics, the Game of Thrones. But the true enemy is beyond the wall, and if we don't unite the realm before they arrive, everyone dies." Ned stood and walked to the window. Outside, night had fallen over Winterfell. "I've spent my whole life believing in honor, in doing the right thing, but what you're describing, it's manipulation, deception, everything I've taught my children to despise. Sometimes honor isn't enough. Sometimes you have to be clever to survive." Jon joined him at the window. Rhaegar believed in honor too, in prophecy and destiny, and it got him killed, got his whole family killed. I won't make that mistake again. "You speak as if you are Rhaegar. Part of me is, the part that remembers dying, the part that knows what's coming. But I'm also Jon Snow, your nephew, Lyanna's son. I'm both, and neither. What do you need to prepare? Time alone, to practice being Jon Snow, to suppress the prince, to make the mask perfect. And once we're in King's Landing, Jon spent every waking moment reinforcing his Jon Snow persona. He spoke only in northern dialect. He moved with deliberate clumsiness, suppressing Rhaegar's trained grace. He avoided anything that might trigger the muscle memory. No harps, no books in High Valyrian, no philosophical discussions. He became the sullen bastard, the quiet boy who stayed in the background and caused no trouble. On the final night before departure, Jon stood in the Godswood, alone except for Ghost. The direwolf sat beside him, white fur almost luminous in the moonlight. "Tomorrow we leave," Jon whispered. "Tomorrow we go to King's Landing. The Red Keep, the place where everything went wrong in my first life. Ghost made no sound, but his red eyes were watchful, intelligent. "I'm afraid," Jon admitted. "I've played my part here in Winterfell. But in the capital, surrounded by people who knew Rhaegar, people who served him, who heard him speak, who watched him fight, how long can I hide what I am?" No answer came, only the rustle of wind through the weirwood leaves. Jon closed his eyes. In his mind, he saw two paths stretching before him. One led to safety, stay in the north, avoid the politics, live as Jon Snow forever. The other led to danger, go south, play the game, risk discovery and death. But only one path led to saving the realm. "I died once to learn how to live," Jon said quietly. The words were becoming a mantra, a reminder. "This time I'll do it right." He opened his eyes. The moon had risen over Winterfell, full and bright. Tomorrow they would leave. Tomorrow the real game would begin. Jon Snow, Rhaegar Targaryen, whoever he was now, would be ready. He had to be. The survival of the Seven Kingdoms depended on it. The journey to King's Landing took a month. Jon rode with the Stark men, keeping distance from the royal party. The King's Road stretched endlessly south, through forests and farmland, over rivers and through small villages. Each day took them further from the north, from the cold and snow, into the warmer lands of the Riverlands and the Crownlands. Jon used the time to observe, to watch, to catalog threats and opportunities. Robert drank constantly, growing louder and more belligerent each night. Cersei retreated into cold silence, speaking to no one unless necessary. Jaime rode alongside the royal wheelhouse, his eyes occasionally finding Jon in the Stark contingent, suspicious, watchful. Joffrey tormented everyone he encountered, servants, soldiers, even his younger siblings. Jon watched the boy and felt Rhaegar's memories stir. In another timeline, this child would be king, would order Ned's death, would torture Sansa, would nearly destroy the realm. Not this time. On the 15th day of travel, Jon found an opportunity. The camp had been made near a river. Most of the party was eating the evening meal. Jon slipped away from the Stark tents and made his way through the camp, careful to avoid notice. He moved like a shadow, using paths between tents where torchlight didn't reach. He found the tent he was looking for, larger than the others, marked with no sigil, positioned away from the main encampment. He listened at the entrance. No voices inside. Jon slipped through the tent flap. The interior was austere. A bedroll, a chest, a small writing desk with parchment and ink. This was the tent of someone who valued function over comfort, someone who kept secrets. Lord Varys, Master of Whispers. Jon moved to the writing desk, began searching through the parchments with careful, practiced movements. Rhaegar had known the Red Keep intimately, had learned where spy masters hid their most valuable intelligence. He found what he was looking for beneath a false bottom in the desk drawer. Letters. Correspondence. Reports from Varys' network of little birds. Jon scanned them quickly. Information about Lannister troop movements. Reports on Stannis Baratheon's activities at Dragonstone. Intelligence about the situation in Essos. About Daenerys Targaryen and her brother Viserys. And then, a letter that made Jon's blood run cold. It was addressed to Varys, written in a flowing hand. The content was vague. References to the delay and waiting for the proper moment and ensuring the succession, but the signature at the bottom was clear. Petyr Baelish, Littlefinger. Jon memorized the contents and returned everything to its place. He was about to leave when a voice spoke from behind him. An interesting place for a bastard boy to find himself. Jon turned slowly. Varys stood in the tent entrance, his hands folded in his sleeves, a slight smile on his round face. The Spider, the Master of Whispers, the man who saw everything, Lord Varys. Jon kept his voice steady, northern, empty of fear. "I was looking for the privy. I must have entered the wrong tent. And yet you ended up at my writing desk, examining my correspondence." Varys entered the tent and let the flap fall closed behind him. "That's quite a navigational error, Lord Snow." Jon said nothing. His mind raced. Varys was dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous person in the realm. He traded in secrets, in whispers, in information that could destroy kingdoms. "You're very quiet," Varys observed. "Most young men caught snooping would be making excuses, pleading ignorance. But not you. You simply stand there, evaluating, calculating, like someone who's done this before." "I'll leave." "Oh, I don't think so. Not until we have a conversation." Varys moved to his desk and sat. "You see, I've been watching you, Jon Snow, Ever since that curious collapse at the feast in Winterfell. Ever since you started behaving in ways that don't quite match what a northern bastard should be. Jon's heart hammered, but he kept his face neutral. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Let me tell you what I've observed. Varys steepled his fingers. You move with a grace that suggests formal training. You speak with an education beyond what Winterfell's maester could provide. You stopped young Bran from climbing at exactly the moment when the Lannister twins were occupied. And now I find you here, searching through my correspondence with the skill of a trained spy. Those are interesting observations, my lord, but they prove nothing. No, they don't. They simply raise questions. Varys leaned forward. So let me ask you directly, Jon Snow. Who are you, really? The tent was silent. Outside, Jon could hear the distant sounds of the camp. Laughter, voices, the normal sounds of an evening meal. Inside, two men faced each other across a gulf of secrets. Jon made a decision, a calculated risk. I need to tell you something about Prince Rhaegar, Jon said quietly. Varys's expression didn't change. Prince Rhaegar is dead. Has been for 15 years. Yes, I know. I was there when he died, at the Trident. I felt Robert's warhammer crush my chest. I felt the rubies scatter from my breastplate. I fell into the river and drowned. For just a moment, Jon saw something else beneath it. Calculation, fear, disbelief. You're claiming to be Rhaegar Targaryen? Varys's voice was barely a whisper. I'm claiming that Rhaegar's consciousness woke up in Jon Snow's body 15 years after the Trident. I have his memories, his knowledge, his skills, everything that made him who he was. Jon took a step closer. You knew him, Lord Varys. You served his father, but you admired the prince. You told Aerys that Rhaegar was the realm's last hope. You wept when you heard he died. Varys stood abruptly. Anyone could know those things. Servants talk, histories record. You wept because you knew Rhaegar would have been a just king, because he cared about prophecy, about the realm, about protecting people from the darkness that was coming. Jon's voice dropped to barely audible. You never told anyone that, Lord Varys. You kept that sentiment private, because admitting you preferred the prince to the king would have been treason. Varys stared at him. How could you possibly know that? Because I remember you telling me, in private, in the Red Keep, you said, Your Grace, the realm needs you to survive. Your father's madness will destroy everything unless you can find a way to stop it. And I told you I was working on it, that I had a plan. That conversation, I never told anyone, never wrote it down. It was a secret between a prince and his spy master. I know. Jon met his eyes. I am Rhaegar Targaryen, Lord Varys, or I was, now I'm something else, something new. But I remember everything. Varys sank back into his chair. For a long moment, he simply breathed. Then he spoke, his voice shaking slightly. This is impossible. I've been telling myself that since I woke up. But here we are. Varys stopped, started again. Prove it. Tell me something only Rhaegar would know. Something that can't be found in any history or overheard from any servant, Jon thought. What would convince Varys completely? What secret had they shared that no one else knew? You asked me once why I read so many prophecies, why I obsessed over the prince that was promised. And I told you about a dream I'd had. A dream of ice and fire, of darkness and dragons, of a long night that would swallow the world. I told you I'd seen the realm burning, seen the dead walking, seen everything ending unless someone stopped it. Jon's voice was steady, and you asked me if I was certain it was prophecy and not just nightmare. And I said, I wish it were nightmare, old friend. I wish it with all my heart. But prophecy doesn't let us choose what we see. Varys's hands trembled. Old friend. He called me, you called me old friend. Only once, only during that conversation. His voice broke. Gods, it's true. You really are, I am what should be impossible. A dead prince returned in the body of his bastard son. Jon knelt before Varys. And I need your help, old friend. Just as I did before. The realm is in danger. Greater danger than it knows, and we have perhaps 3 years to save it. Varys reached out a shaking hand and touched Jon's face, searching for something, some sign. His eyes were wet. I mourned you, Varys whispered. When word came from the Trident, I wept for hours. You were the realm's hope, the good king we needed, and you died for a prophecy most people didn't even believe. I died because I was arrogant, because I thought I knew better than everyone else, because I pursued Lyanna Stark without thinking about the consequences. Jon's voice was bitter. I destroyed my own family, started a war, got tens of thousands killed, all because I believed in destiny. Now I know better. Now I know that prophecy doesn't excuse cruelty. That destiny doesn't matter if the realm burns before it can be fulfilled. Jon stood. I'm not here to reclaim the throne. I'm not here for power or glory. I'm here to save the realm I destroyed, to prepare for the long night, to unite the kingdoms before the dead come. Then he nodded slowly. What do you need from me? Information, your network, your little birds. I need to know what Littlefinger is planning. I need proof of the Lannister incest. I need intelligence on everything that threatens the realm. Littlefinger is dangerous, more dangerous than most people realize. I know. That's why he needs to be dealt with first. Before we reach King's Landing, before he can execute whatever scheme he's planning. Jon leaned forward. Can you get me evidence? Something concrete that proves his crimes? What crimes specifically? The murder of Jon Arryn, the manipulation of Lysa Arryn, the embezzlement from the royal treasury, the conspiracy to start a war between Stark and Lannister. Jon's voice was hard. Everything. I want everything on Petyr Baelish, and I want it before we reach the capital. Varys smiled. It was a cold expression. You're asking me to betray a man I've worked with for years. I'm asking you to help me save the realm. Littlefinger doesn't care about the realm. He cares about himself, his ambitions, his games. He'll burn everything to ash if it means he can climb one rung higher on the ladder. And you? What do you care about, Prince Rhaegar? Or should I call you Jon Snow? Rhaegar Targaryen is dead. I'm what came after. Jon met Varys's eyes. And I care about the living, about protecting them from the dead, about making sure the mistakes I made before don't happen again. Varys was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and walked to his chest. He opened it and withdrew a sealed document. This is a report from one of my little birds in the Vale. It details Lysa Arryn's confession to her handmaiden about poisoning Jon Arryn on Littlefinger's instructions. The handmaiden is loyal to me. She'll testify if needed. What else do you have? Records of Littlefinger's embezzlement, letters between him and various parties arranging loans at extortionate rates, evidence of his manipulation of the crown's debt. Varys pulled out more documents. I've been collecting these for years, waiting for the right moment to use them. Why didn't you expose him before? Because I wasn't certain who would benefit from his fall. Power abhors a vacuum. Remove one player and another takes their place, often someone worse. Varys handed the documents to Jon. But if you're truly Rhaegar returned, if you're here to save the realm rather than conquer it, then perhaps the vacuum can be filled with something better. Thank you, old friend. Don't thank me yet. This is only the beginning. The Lannisters are a much larger problem. And Robert, Varys shook his head. The king is not the man I remember from the rebellion. He's broken, drunk, barely holding the realm together. I know, which is why we need to act carefully. Remove the threats without destroying what little stability remains. Jon moved toward the tent entrance. Can I count on your support? My information, my counsel. Varys's expression was serious. But I need something from you in return. What? That you won't let prophecy or destiny cloud your judgment. I promise. I died once to learn how to live. I won't waste this second chance. Varys nodded. Then we have an accord. The spider and the dragon. Just like old times. Jon slipped out of the tent and made his way back to the Stark encampment. His mind raced with possibilities. Varys was on his side. The evidence against Littlefinger was secured. The first piece of the puzzle was in place. Now he just needed to survive the rest of the journey. They reached King's Landing on the 32nd day. The city rose before them, massive and sprawling. 500,000 people packed within its walls. The stench hit Jon even from a distance. Human waste, rotting fish, unwashed bodies. He remembered this smell, remembered how it had permeated everything in the Red Keep. The royal party entered through the King's Gate. Small folk lined the streets, watching in silence. They didn't cheer, didn't celebrate. They simply watched as their king returned home. Jon rode beside Ned, both of them taking in the city. Winterfell had been clean, organized, manageable. This was chaos, poverty, desperation. I'd forgotten how much I hate this place, Ned muttered. It gets worse once you're inside the Red Keep, Jon said quietly. Court politics, backstabbing, everyone playing their little games. They climbed the hill to the Red Keep. The castle loomed above the city, red stone walls glowing in the afternoon sun. Jon felt Rhaegar's memories surge. He'd lived here, grown up in these halls. This had been home, and now it was enemy territory. The party dismounted in the courtyard. Servants rushed forward to take horses and luggage. Ned was greeted by members of the small council. Jon stayed in the background, watching. And then he saw Littlefinger. Petyr Baelish stood near the entrance to the Tower of the Hand, slim and neat in his fine clothes, a mocking smile on his face. He watched the Stark party with calculating eyes. Jon felt hatred rise in his throat. This man had murdered Jon Arryn, had manipulated Lysa Arryn, had orchestrated the events that led to war in the original timeline. This man was responsible for so much death and suffering. Not for much longer, that evening, Jon requested a private meeting with Ned in the Hand's chambers. They met after dark, behind locked doors. "I have the evidence," Jon said. He spread the documents Varys had given him across Ned's desk. "Everything we need to convict Littlefinger of treason." Ned examined the documents. His face grew darker with each page. Gods, he really did kill Jon Arryn. And the embezzlement, this is millions of gold dragons. He's been robbing the crown for years and profiting from the loans he makes to cover the shortfall. It's brilliant in a terrible way. He creates the debt, then offers the solution, then gets rich from the interest. Robert needs to see this carefully. We need to present it the right way. If Littlefinger suspects what we know, he'll run. Or worse, he'll strike first. They spent the next hour planning how to approach Robert, how to present the evidence, how to ensure Littlefinger was arrested before he could retaliate. Finally, Ned nodded. "Tomorrow. I'll request a private audience with Robert. Show him the documents, he'll be furious." "Good. Let him be furious. Fury will make him act." The next day, Ned met with Robert in the king's private chambers. Jon waited outside, pacing. An hour passed, then 2. Finally, the door opened and Ned emerged. "It's done," Ned said quietly. "Robert wants Littlefinger arrested immediately." What was his reaction? Rage. Absolute rage. He threw a wine cup at the wall. Then he ordered me to have Littlefinger brought to the throne room in chains. Jon felt satisfaction bloom in his chest. When? He wants this done today. They found Littlefinger in his chambers in the Tower of the Hand. The Master of Coin was writing correspondence, completely unaware of what was coming. Ned entered with 6 Stark guards. Petyr Baelish, you are under arrest for the murder of Lord Jon Arryn, for embezzlement from the royal treasury, and for conspiracy against the crown. Littlefinger's mask of amusement slipped. For just a moment Jon saw genuine fear, then it was gone, replaced by calculation. This is absurd. On what evidence? Documents bearing your own hand. Ned gestured to the guards. Take him. Littlefinger didn't resist. He was too smart for that. As the guards led him away, his eyes found Jon standing in the doorway. You, Littlefinger said softly. The bastard. You did this. I did nothing, Lord Baelish. You destroyed yourself with your own schemes. Did I? Or did someone help things along? Someone who knew exactly what to look for? Littlefinger's smile returned, but it was cold now. Dangerous. You're more than you appear, Jon Snow. Much more. I wonder what secrets you're hiding. Jon said nothing. The guards dragged Littlefinger away. The trial was swift. Robert sat the Iron Throne, hungover and furious. The evidence was presented. Lysa Arryn's handmaiden testified about the poisoning. Varys produced the embezzlement records. Everything was laid bare before the court. Littlefinger tried to talk his way free, tried to spin lies and half-truths, but the evidence was overwhelming. Robert's judgment was harsh and immediate. Petyr Baelish, I find you guilty of regicide, embezzlement, and treason. The sentence is death. Littlefinger's composure finally broke. Your Grace, please, I can be useful. You can die. Robert gestured to Sir Island Payne. Executioner, do your duty. One threat eliminated, but others remained. That evening, Robert summoned Ned and Jon to his chambers. The king was surprisingly sober, his face grave. I need to tell you something, Robert said. Something I should have told you at Winterfell, but I was too drunk to think straight. Jon Arryn was investigating something before he died. Something about my children, about Joffrey. Robert's hands clenched. He found a book. The lineages of the great houses. He was comparing my bastards to my true-born children. Your Grace, Ned said carefully. Why would he do that? Because he suspected the truth. Because he saw what I refused to see. Robert looked at them both. Joffrey isn't mine. Neither is Myrcella or Tommen. They're Jaime's. All three of them mad-eyed. The admission hung in the air. Jon felt his pulse quicken. This was it. The moment that would change everything. You're certain? Ned asked. Look at them. Golden hair, green eyes. Not a drop of Baratheon in any of them. Every child I've ever sired has black hair. Every single one. The genetics don't lie. Robert's voice was hollow. Cersei's been fucking her brother for years, and I was too blind and drunk to notice. What will you do? What can I do? If I expose them, it tears the realm apart. The Lannisters will fight. War will start again. Thousands will die. Robert poured himself wine. But if I do nothing, a bastard sits my throne. A false king. Everything I built falls to lies. Jon stepped forward. Your Grace, there's a way to handle this. Quietly, strategically. Robert looked at him. The bastard speaks. What would you suggest, boy? Arrest them. Cersei and Jaime both. Quietly. In the night. Before they can rally support or send messages to Tywin, Jon's voice was steady. Present the evidence publicly. The lineage book. You're bastards. The pattern that's impossible to deny. Make it so clear that even the Lannisters can't dispute it. And then, execute them for treason. Send the children to the faith. Remove every trace of the lie. Jon met Robert's eyes. You need an heir, Your Grace, a legitimate heir. And there's one available. Who? Stannis? Robert grimaced. My brother is a hard man. Unforgiving. The realm wouldn't. Not Stannis. Me. Silence. Robert stared. Ned's face went pale. You, Robert said finally, you're a bastard. Ned's bastard. No, Your Grace. I'm not. Jon took a breath. This was the moment, the revelation that would either save him or doom him. I'm the son of Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen. I'm a legitimate Targaryen prince. Robert's hand went to the warhammer that wasn't there. His face purpled with rage. What did you say? Got her with child, and you're telling me that bastard sits in my castle? In my city? Robert stood. I'll kill him. I'll kill him right now. I didn't rape her. Jon's voice cut through Robert's rage. I loved her, and she loved me. We were married, Your Grace. Married in secret by a high septon. The marriage was legitimate. Our son is legitimate. Lies. Rhaegar abducted her. No, she came willingly. Because we loved each other, because we wanted to fulfill the prophecy together. Jon's voice dropped. I know you don't want to hear this. I know it destroys everything you've believed for 15 years. But it's true. Lyanna Stark loved Rhaegar Targaryen, and I am their son. His hands shook. For a moment, Jon thought the king would strike him, but then Robert spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Prove it. How? I don't know. Tell me something only Lyanna would have known. Something she would have told Rhaegar, but no one else. What intimate detail that only a lover would know? She had a scar, Jon said quietly, on her left shoulder, from when she fell from a horse as a child. She was embarrassed by it, thought it made her less beautiful. I told her it made her human, that perfection was boring. His voice softened with memory. She laughed at that, said only a prince would think perfection boring. Robert's face crumpled. Tears ran down his cheeks. She showed me that scar once, when we were children, made me promise never to tell anyone, said it was our secret. He sank back into his chair. How do you know about it? Because Rhaegar knew. Because she showed him. Because they loved each other enough to share secrets. Robert wept, great heaving sobs. 15 years of grief and rage and loss poured out of him. Ned stood frozen, uncertain how to respond. Finally, Robert spoke through his tears. I loved her. Gods, I loved her so much. And she loved him. She always loved him. I'm sorry, Your Grace. I'm sorry for the pain my father caused you. The war, the deaths, all of it. Are you? Robert looked up, eyes red. Are you really Rhaegar's son, or are you just a clever bastard with a good story? I'm his son, and I'm something more. Jon knelt before the Iron Throne. I'm not here to claim your throne. I'm not here for power. I'm here to save the realm, to prepare for what's coming, to do what Rhaegar couldn't do before he died. What's coming? The long night, the White Walkers, the army of the dead, everything the old stories warned about. They're real, Your Grace, and they're coming. And when they do, we need to be ready. Robert stared at him for a long moment. Then he spoke. You sound insane. I know, but I'm also right, and you know it. Jon met his eyes. You've heard the reports from the Night's Watch. Rangers disappearing, wildlings fleeing south in greater numbers. Something is wrong beyond the wall. Something is waking up. You, a boy of 14? No. I think WE can stop it. Together, a united realm, every kingdom working together. That's the only way we survive. Robert was quiet for a long time. Then he turned to Ned. You knew about this? About the boy's parentage? I've known since Lyanna died. She made me promise to protect him, to raise him as my bastard, to keep the secret from you. Ned's voice was steady. I've kept that promise for 15 years, and I'd keep it for 15 more if I needed to. Because she was my sister, because the boy was innocent, because killing children is wrong. Ned met Robert's eyes. You know this, Robert. In your heart, you know it. The old friend he trusted more than anyone. The boy who claimed to be the son of his greatest enemy. Show me, Robert said finally. Show me proof of the Lannister incest. Show me the lineage book. Show me everything. And then we'll see. Over the next week, the evidence was assembled. The genealogy book that Jon Arryn had been reading, Robert's bastards brought to the Red Keep one by one. Gendry from Flea Bottom, with his black hair and blue eyes. Maya Stone from the Vale. Bella from the Crossroads Inn. Edric Storm from Storm's End. All of them unmistakably Baratheon. Black hair, blue eyes, strong jaws. The resemblance to Robert was undeniable. And then the Trueborn children, Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. Golden-haired, green-eyed, looking nothing like Robert and everything like Jaime Lannister. The pattern was absolute. 300 years of Baratheon genetics, unbroken. And then Cersei's children, all exceptions. Robert ordered Cersei and Jaime arrested. It was done quietly in the night, before they could escape or send warning to Tywin. The Kingsguard offered no resistance. Even they could see the truth. The trial was public. Every lord in King's Landing attended. The evidence was presented methodically. The genealogy records the bastards lined up, living proof of Baratheon genes. The testimony of servants who had seen Jaime entering the Queen's chambers. Cersei denied nothing. She stood before the court, beautiful and defiant, and admitted everything. Yes, Jaime and I are lovers. Yes, the children are ours. And yes, I'd do it all again. Her voice was cold. You want to know why? Because I was sold to a drunk who never loved me, who spent our wedding night whispering another woman's name, who gave me nothing but disappointment and disgust. Jaime loved me, truly loved me, and our children are the proof of that love. The court erupted, shouting, accusations. Robert sat the Iron Throne, his face carved from stone. The sentence is death, he said, for both of you, to be carried out tomorrow at dawn. That night, Jon stood on the battlements of the Red Keep, looking out over King's Landing. The city sprawled below, a sea of torchlight and shadow. Tomorrow, everything would change. The Lannisters would fall, the succession would be secured. Footsteps behind him. Jon turned. Robert Baratheon approached, moving heavily, a wineskin in his hand. Can't sleep either? The king asked. No, Your Grace. Robert stood beside him, looking out at the city. Tomorrow I execute a woman I married, a man I called friend, the mother and father of children I raised as my own. I'm sorry. Are you? This is what you wanted. What you pushed for. I wanted justice. I wanted the realm to survive. I didn't want you to suffer. Robert took a long drink. You sound like him, like Rhaegar. That same noble tone, that same certainty that you're doing the right thing. Am I wrong? No. You're right. That's what makes it worse. Robert turned to Jon. I killed your father, crushed his chest with this hammer, watched him drown in the Trident, and I'd do it again if I had to. I know. But you're not him, are you? You're something else. Something new. I'm his son. I'm Lyanna's son. I'm the boy Ned Stark raised. I'm all of those things and none of them. Robert studied him. If I name you my heir, if I legitimize you as a Targaryen, can you promise me something? Better than me, better than Rhaegar, better than all the kings who came before. Promise me you'll actually give a damn about the realm, about the people, about something other than power and prophecy. Jon met his eyes. I promise. I died once to learn how to live. This time, I'll do it right. To Lyanna, to the woman we both loved. Jon took the wineskin and drank. The wine was sour, strong. He handed it back. To Lyanna, Jon said quietly, "May she rest in peace." They stood together in silence, watching the city below. Two men bound by grief and love for the same woman. Two men who should have been enemies but weren't. Tomorrow would bring death and change. But tonight, there was peace. The executions happened at dawn. Cersei and Jaime Lannister were beheaded on the steps of the Great Sept of Baelor. Thousands witnessed it. The Queen and the Kingslayer, brought low by their own crimes. Joffrey was sent to the wall, screaming and crying. Myrcella and Tommen were given to the faith, to be raised as wards of the Seven. A raven was sent to Casterly Rock, informing Tywin Lannister of his children's fates. The old lion's response came 3 days later. "I will have your head for this, Robert Baratheon." But Robert was ready. The realm was united behind him. The truth of the incest had spread. Even Tywin's bannermen questioned supporting him. A week after the executions, Robert made his announcement. The court assembled in the throne room. Every lord, every knight, every person of importance packed into the hall. Robert sat the Iron Throne, Ned beside him as hand. "The realm knows I have no legitimate heirs," Robert said, his voice carrying through the hall. "My marriage to Cersei Lannister was based on lies. The children she bore were not mine. I am left without succession." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "But there is a Targaryen heir, a legitimate prince born of lawful marriage, the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark." Robert gestured. "Jon Snow, step forward." Knelt before the throne. "Jon Snow, I legitimize you as Jon Targaryen, and I name you my heir. When I die, you will be king." The court exploded. Shouts of protest, shouts of approval, chaos. Robert raised his hand for silence. "This is my will. Any who oppose it can leave now. But know this, the realm needs stability. It needs a king who will prepare for what's coming, and Jon Targaryen is that king." Slowly the protests died down. Lords began to kneel. First Ned, then others. One by one, the court acknowledged Jon as heir. When it was done, Robert looked down at Jon. "Don't make me regret this." "I won't, Your Grace." 6 months later, Robert Baratheon died in his sleep. His heart gave out, worn down by years of excess. He died peacefully, surrounded by friends, having made his peace with the past. Jon Targaryen was crowned king. His first act was to send resources to the wall. Men, weapons, dragonglass. He organized the greatest mobilization in Westerosi history, not for war between kingdoms, but for war against the dead. His second act was to send a letter to Essos, to Daenerys Targaryen. "Sister, I am Rhaegar's son. I am the ice. You are the fire. Together we will sing. Come home. The realm needs its dragons." Daenerys arrived 6 months later with 3 dragons. Drogon, Rhaegal, Viserion. She met Jon in the throne room, studied him with violet eyes. "You're my brother's son," she said. "I am, and I need your help." They formed an alliance. Not marriage. Jon had no desire to continue Targaryen incest traditions. But partnership, the dragon and the wolf, ice and fire. Together, they prepared the realm. When the White Walkers came, 3 years later, the 7 kingdoms were ready. 50,000 soldiers at the wall, dragon glass weapons, Valyrian steel, dragons flying overhead. Every kingdom united under one purpose: survival. The long night lasted 3 days. 3 days of brutal fighting against an enemy that didn't tire, didn't fear, didn't stop. The dead came in waves, relentless and terrible, but the living held. Jon fought in the thick of it, Longclaw in his hand, a gift from Jeor Mormont years before. The Valyrian steel blade sang as it cut through whites and White Walkers alike. On the 3rd day, Jon faced the Night King. They fought on the wall itself, above the screaming chaos of battle. The Night King was fast, impossibly strong, wielding an ice blade that shattered normal steel. But Jon had lived this fight before, had trained for it, had prepared. He ducked under the ice blade, spun, drove Longclaw through the Night King's chest. The ancient enemy shattered, and with him every White Walker, every dead thing he'd raised crumbled to dust. The long night ended. The living had won. Years later, Jon stood in the throne room, Daenerys beside him. The realm was at peace, rebuilt, stronger than ever. "You did it," she said. "You saved them all. We did it. Together. What now?" Jon looked out the window at King's Landing, at the realm he'd destroyed once and saved twice. "Now we make sure it stays saved. We prepare for the next threat. We build something better than what came before." He turned to her. "We make sure Rhaegar's mistakes never happen again. And if they do, then we fix them. That's what second chances are for." Daenerys smiled. "The dragon and the wolf. Ice and fire. The song continues." "Yes," Jon said, "the song continues." Outside, dragons flew over the city. The people below looked up in wonder, not fear. The realm had been saved, the dead defeated, the kingdoms united, and Jon Snow, Jon Targaryen, Rhaegar reborn, stood watch over it all. He had died once to learn how to live, and this time he'd gotten it right. Let us know what you'd like to see next. The end.